That big boss less special. It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level. Second level. Second level gaming. Second level.
Comrades, working people, Chernobyl is yours and your family's future. Come and let us build a new, better tomorrow. Every pair of hands is needed. Atomic energy is our future.
We experienced a great misfortune, an accident in the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl. The reactor number 4 exploded. The firefighting action continues. A zone within 30-kilometer radius is contaminated. Pripyat. It is here where the families and employees of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant had lived until the day of the catastrophe. Scrapyard. Immediately after the explosion, about 50,000 citizens were irrevocably evicted. Look around and pick a place you would like to get to know better. Scrapyard. In the area of the exclusion zone, there are several scrapyards with the vehicles and machines used during firefighting and neutralizing action after the explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Trucks. The majority of the vehicles and machines used in the action were not suitable for further use due to the high radiation. Bulldozer tank. Unfortunately, more and more often, because of the value of scrap metal, illegal scrap collectors are stealing and selling valuable components of the vehicles and machinery. Back to Pripyat. Scrapyard. Kiev. Do you remember the 26th of April 1986? Was it an ordinary day or a special day? I remember it very well because my father was alerted very early that day, at about 5 or 6 in the morning, and disappeared for a few days. The next day, I remember there were no buses in Kiev. Later we learned that the buses had been sent to pick up people from the villages near Chernobyl, in particular from the very town of Chernobyl, and to relocate them. I remember that time very well, as there were no information. I remember that 2 days later, my father returned and told us not to talk about it. It was a secret, but there had been a major disaster, an explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and that there were dangerous radioactive substances in the air. He suggested that we stay home, not to go out. But despite that, we went to school. They did not call off any activities. There was no official information, but many rumors. It was impossible to buy the train or plane tickets. There was a great panic. Everyone tried to get away from Kiev, to leave, because everyone was afraid. There was no information at all, but there were many rumors about what had happened there. Only then we got more information. I remember the 1st of May, Labor Day. Peace, Labor, May. I marched among school children, here along Kryshecik. We were all marching, and I was holding the flag of the Soviet Union in my hands. We all had to march, we were monitored. I remember that there was an international bicycle race on the May holiday, and everyone was saying, look, all the foreigners are participating in the competition, and everything is fine. It's all just rumors. I mean, we had no truthful information for a long time. I remember that time very well. My younger brother Volodymyr was sent to Azov Sea to a summer camp. I stayed in Kiev for the whole summer. My father spent all the time, the whole summer, in Chernobyl. He was an Air Force officer, and they were responsible for the evacuation first, then for the machines, and then they extinguished the fire. They had many tasks. Then, many years later, our family paid a great price for the amount of time my father spent there. We could consult the best specialists, physicians, who, having learned that my father was at Chernobyl, said that his cancer was 100% due to the exposure. Chernobyl was a tragedy, and there is no doubt about that. But could you think of anything positive from that time? Could you note at least one positive thing that came from this tragedy? Positive? What can be positive about this tragedy? Millions of people faced this problem. Thousands, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of children and people in general faced the diseases. The number of cancer patients increased dramatically. Many children also had health problems. And knowing that Ukraine was not in a very good condition, no proper social protection, especially healthcare, so we are very grateful to the Poles, Czechs and French and many nations, countries that helped to treat children from Ukraine, Chernobyl children. They helped and are still helping to eliminate the effects of this tragedy, which still continues. The shelter construction is ongoing. We understand that it would be very difficult to do this without the international support. I asked about that because many historians say that the explosion at Chernobyl contributed to the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it was one of the causes of its breakup. Wasn't it? I cannot say if it was. I do not believe that the tragedy at Chernobyl resulted in the collapse of the Soviet Union. No, it did not. The Soviet Union had not been operating properly before that time. There were economic threats, and many mistakes were made, and one of those mistakes was the consequence of the inefficient system. But this tragedy, I am sure, had no direct influence on the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Зав'язки з тим, що Радянський Союз розпався.
Окей, дякую bardzo.
Дуже дякую.
Нема питань.
You said that your father was involved in mitigating the effects of the explosion. Did he tell you anything about it? Do you have any memories of it? He told me a lot. It was a threat that no one saw.
Це була загроза, яку ніхто не бачив.
This threat was associated with the need to eliminate the effects of the accident, to relocate the people and carry out the deactivation.
Ліквідувати аварію, забрати людей, зробити дезінфекцію, чи дезінфекція, як ви знаєте, деактивація.
Those issues were paid a lot of attention. It was necessary to determine the boundaries. Much work was done at that time, and it had to be done very quickly. Moreover, there had never been such a big problem in the human history before, so unfortunately many mistakes were made, and those mistakes cost people their lives. Scrap Kiev. The Azure swimming pool was a pride of the city. It was built in 1970 and it had served the residents until the day of the explosion at the power plant. It had a pool and a gym. Diving platform. After the explosion in 1986, the pool was used by the liquidators and the power plant employees. It was finally closed in 1998. Gym. At the gym, they held physical education lessons and sport competitions for children from the nearby school number 3. Back to Pripyat. Elementary school number 3. Indoctrination was a crucial element of the education. From early on, children were taught about the creators of communism, the leading role of the party, and the foundations of the socialist society. The teachers instilled a total submission of the individual and the collectivization of the actions. Such classrooms were indispensable in all the republics of the Soviet Union or the countries of the Eastern Bloc, such as East Germany or Poland. Walk around and learn more about the education in the Soviet Union. Indoctrination was a crucial element of the education. From early on, children were taught about the creators of communism. Meetings, concerts, and artistic work reviews, as well as the whole school's cultural life, took place in here. In fact, every day various groups held their meetings and rehearsals here. As you can see, there's a stage and a grand piano for the accompaniment. It's a standard stage in each school in Pripyat.
И даже есть там пианино для того, чтобы можно было сделать какое-то там музыкальное оформление или что-то в этом роде. То есть это стандартные как бы
I suggest we go to the next hall.
для всех школ города Припяти. Ну, я тут предлагаю еще идем в другой зал, кабинет.
Mathematics was the basis on which the technical development of the Soviet Union was built. As early as primary school, the smartest pupils, supervised by their teachers, developed their skills in sciences. The best of them attended secondary schools and later went to renowned universities to become scientists or engineers. Nevertheless, it did not prevent the Russians from building a malfunctioning nuclear reactor. Somewhere in here, you will find a wooden case. Open it carefully. At the end of April 1986, shortly before the catastrophe, the whole city was preparing for the International Labor Day. As usual on the 1st of May, a pompous march was to take place to honor the working class of the Soviet Union. Nowadays, few people may remember that it was established in 1889 by the socialist parties of the United Kingdom, France, Germany and Belgium in memory of the bloodily repressed workers' demonstrations in Chicago in 1886. Shortly after the Second World War, in which the USA and the Western countries fought against the Soviet Union and the countries of the Eastern Bloc, the Cold War began. It meant a rising tension between the USA and the Soviet Union without a direct aggression from any of those countries. It led to the arms race and the large-scale production of mass destruction weapon. The fallout shelters were built and every public building, including schools and kindergartens, had warehouses with gas masks for the whole staff and the students. It's a different place.
Это
This is a
спортивный
gym
зал,
of the school number 3.
школа номер 3. А здесь проходили
Various sporting
разные
events were held here.
спортивные соревнования. Здесь каждый день проходили
Every day, physical education
занятия
classes were carried
физкультурой,
out.
можно было заниматься
Children
футболом,
could play football,
баскетболом.
basketball.
Тут даже были такие, знаете, как
There were
трибуны,
even
где
some sorts of
школьники
stands where students
поболеть
could
за
cheer on their
своих,
teams and their
свои
rivals as
команды,
well.
и за своих соперников в том числе. И всегда было популярно,
And it was always popular.
что занятия там, футболом,
Football,
волейболом,
volleyball, basketball
одни из
were
самых
one of the most common
распространенных и
and popular
популярных
types of games that were
видов
practiced in
игровых,
all
которые
schools.
практически были во всех школах, и проводились только и такие
Not only
городские
school, but also
соревнования
the
и
town
другие
competitions and
мероприятия.
other events were
И
held here.
школьники после этого
Afterwards,
были,
students traveled to
ездили в
Kiev,
город
the
Киев
province,
и область,
and other regions of
другие
Ukraine.
регионы Украины. Но идем
Now
еще
we will
в
see a
другое
different
место.
place. Elementary School Community Center. The Energetic Community Center was a modern recreation facility with an auditorium, a sports hall, a cafe and a disco. In front of the center, there was also Lenin's monument. However, it hasn't survived. In this place, the cultural life of Pripyat was bursting. To find out more, listen to the stories of the guide.
Энергетик был центром культурной жизни.
The Energetic Community Center was the center of the cultural life of Pripyat.
Практически все такие массовые мероприятия. Здесь
Almost all mass
женились,
events were
крестили
held here.
детей. Здесь были свадьбы,
Weddings, birth
Здесь
registration of newborns,
партийные
wedding
профсоюзные
parties,
собрания,
party and union meetings,
многочисленные
and
концерты.
numerous concerts.
И тогда очень много людей ходило сюда. А зал, который мы сейчас видим, это дискотека,
Back then, many people were coming here.
которая проходила в выходные
The hall,
дни.
which you can see now, used to
в
be a
городе
disco
было
club.
очень
A
много
disco was
молодежи,
organized at the weekends, as the town was full of
средний
many young
возраст
people.
жителей был 28 лет. Поэтому всегда было
The
людно,
average age was 28,
весело.
so the disco was always
хорошо.
crowded. People had fun and
И
felt good
другой
there.
раз хочется верить, что жизнь, которая
Sometimes I
там
just
в
want to
соседнем
believe
зале,
that the
которая
social
завтра
life
еще
there,
продолжается.
in the next room,
Но, увы,
in the hall,
время ушло.
is still ongoing.
Дуже добре пам'ятаю день.
I remember very well the day when we first found out about it. It was rumored, as you could not talk about it in the Soviet Union. We immediately felt that this subject was a taboo. We seemed to find out about it quite accidentally. As I am from Lviv, we could listen to some European radio stations, so we heard about it just because Sweden released this information, and then it reached us as rumors. So my mom and I still remember how it was, just day by day. We learned about it on the 2nd of May 1986. For example, the tragedy occurred on the 26th of April 1986, and we found out as late as the 2nd of May. We were in Carpathian Mountains. We never liked attending those demonstrations with banners of Lenin, Hail to Communism. We never liked doing it. We escaped to Carpathian Mountains and were there on May holidays. So on the 2nd of May, we learned about the tragedy. We were together. My mom was with our friend. The four of us arrived to Lviv immediately. I remember that everyone was asked to do wet cleaning in the house every day. Only then doctors began to warn against coming out into the streets and about taking a lot of medicines with iodine. And I remember exactly that we applied iodine around our necks to prevent the radiation effect.
Але в чому трагедія? Трагедія в
And the
тому,
tragedy?
що
The tragedy is, and you realize it only
зараз
now, that the
вже
Soviet
розумієш,
system really
що
neglected people, and not
радянська
just
влада настільки
Ukrainians.
нехтувала
It is unfair to say
не
that only
лише
Ukraine suffered,
українцями, бо
as the
несправедливо
cloud
сказати,
went
що
to
постраждала
Belarus.
лише Україна. Хмара пішла на Білорусію. І просто яка зневага була до людей, що
And the real
люди
contempt to
26
people
квітня,
was
ми
that on
дізналися
the 26th
2
of
травня,
April,
люди
we
нічого не
learned
знали.
about it on the 2nd
Людям
of
нічого не
May.
сказали.
People knew
Більше того,
nothing and no one
інформацію
told
блокували.
anything.
Більше того, пожежники
Moreover,
їхали
the information was banned.
пожежу
Firemen
на
involved
Чорнобилі,
in the
їм
fire
навіть не говорили,
extinguishing
що
at
стався
Chernobyl
радіоактивний
were not
вибух.
even
Вони
informed
їхали
about the
тушити
radioactive
звичайно, гасити
explosion.
звичайну пожежу.
They were sent to extinguish the regular
Одного
fire.
з них звати
They were young
Володимир
boys.
Правник.
One of them,
24
Volodymyr
роки,
Pravnik,
хлопець-пожежник,
24
загинув.
years old,
Загинув
died.
трагічно. Він мав
He
смертельну
died tragically.
дозу радіації.
He received a
багато
lethal
хлопців,
dose of
які
radiation,
першими добровольці
just as
кинулися
many
це
other
все
boys,
гасити.
the first
І мама навіть
volunteers
згадує, що
who
було дуже
rushed
багато
to extinguish the
добровольців, дуже
fire.
багато волонтерів,
My
людей,
mom
які
can
кинулися
remember a
просто
lot of
все
volunteers
рятувати і
who
допомагати
rushed to
людям.
save everything,
І
to help and
цього
rescue
хлопця
people.
забрали до Москви.
The guy I
Матір
mentioned was
мусила
taken
їхати
to
до
Moscow.
Москви.
His
І
mother had to
там
go
її
to
зустріли
Moscow,
біля
where
Потіна
she
і
was
сказали,
told
ви
at the
нічого не маєте
train,
права тут говорити,
"You are
ви
not
мусите
allowed to say
мовчати».
anything
А
here.
вже за
You must be
11 днів,
silent.
хлопець
In
помер
11
просто на
days,
руках
the
мами.
guy died on his mother's
І
hands.
так його і поховали, сказали, що навіть тіло боялися назад вести в
So he was
Україну, бо
buried,
так
and even his
радянська
body
влада
was not
ховала
taken
цю
back to Ukraine.
інформацію. Так,
That's how the
постраждали,
Soviet authorities
всі
were
постраждали
hiding all the
серед
information.
радіація.
There
Хмара
were
була,
many victims,
вона
as this
не як
radioactive
дощ,
cloud
вона
was not like rain.
розповсюджується миттєво
It
і
immediately
на
spread
великі
over the
території.
large areas.
Але ніхто по сьогоднішній день так і не знає досконало багатьох речей. Всі ці злочини, вони поховані. Ми дізналися, більшість ми
The
дізналися
most
лише
of the
тоді, коли
information
Радянський
was
Союз
only learned
розпався.
after the
Поки
collapse of
Радянський
the Soviet
Союз був,
Union.
від 86-го року ми
Since
тільки лише
1986,
здогадувалися,
until
тільки
the
лише
end of the
інформація
Soviet
між
Union,
людьми ходила.
we could
Ніхто
only
не
guess
знав,
and
що
exchange the
насправді
information between each
Більше
other.
того,
No one knew what
постійно
really
люди,
happened.
крадькомали
Moreover,
говорили, що
people
там
kept
робляться
speaking
злочини,
secretly about the
там
committed crimes
людей,
and about the people
просто,
who were sent to
кидають на
death.
смерть. Це
Elementary School Number 3, Amusement Park. A Ferris wheel was supposed to be the biggest attraction of the amusement park. 20 gondolas were to carry up to 80 people. They could have admired the panoramic view of the city at 20 meters. Guide.
1 мая 1986 года
On the 1st of May 1986, the town was supposed to host a significant event. The town first amusement park was going to be opened.
парк аттракционов. Для такого небольшого города,
I believe that
который
for
имеет
such a small
уже
town,
достаточно такую
which already had
инфраструктуру,
a solid
открытие
infrastructure,
такого парка,
the opening of
ну,
the
я
park
думаю,
was
что у
very
него большое
important,
значение, потому что
also
очень
because there were
много
so many
детей,
children in the town.
и, конечно, в
And
субботу,
of course,
воскресенье
on
прийти
Saturdays
просто
and
с кем-то
Sundays,
покататься и так
people
далее.
would be
Здесь
able
было
to just go there and have fun.
колесо обозрения,
There was a Ferris wheel, swings,
карусели,
roundabouts,
и даже
and
машинки,
even bumper cars, which you
в
can
которых можно
drive
было
and bump
покататься,
into other cars.
посталкиваться и так далее. Вот. Ну и
There was a
рядом
center
находился
nearby
центр, где
where
можно
people
было
could
зайти,
go and have a
попить
coffee,
кофе, может быть,
a
даже
snack,
где-то
or lunch,
перекусить,
or spend a good
пообедать.
time with their
И с
kids.
детворой просто хорошо провести время. Но 26
But the
апреля
tragedy of the
всё это
26th of
перевернуло, и
April
27
damaged all these
апреля
plans, and
весь
on the
город был
27th of April,
эвакуирован.
the entire town
Но
was evacuated.
всё, что осталось от этого
Right now we
аквапарка.
can see all that's left of this
Возможно.
park. There are rumors that the amusement park was opened shortly after the explosion to distract people from the disaster, but no one can confirm this information, and the preserved swimming amusement park, hospital, Parishi village, Moscow Eye. Top of the antenna, the Duga-2 radar began its work in July 1976. The radar was used to detect the ballistic missiles with the system consisted of the two receiving antennas. The smaller one was 90 meters high and 300 meters long, and it covered 14 to 30 megahertz range. The larger one was 150 meters high and 500 meters long. range 4 to 14 MHz. Top of the antenna. What you hear is the transmission received by the antenna you're standing on. The signal disturbed the short connectivity and was called the Russian woodpecker after the disaster of the reactor number 4. Due to the interference caused by the radiation, the Moscow Eye was turned off forever. Training room. Control room. Control room. Control room. There are a lot of conspiracy theories about the Moscow Eye. Some say that the antennas were used to cause storms anywhere in the world, and others about manipulating people's minds with the radio waves. No fact supports these theories, and the original long-range missile detection system of the radar seems to be true. Training room. Guide under the antenna. Top of the antenna, under the antenna. The radar was able to detect the start of ballistic missiles from the northeastern parts of the United States. About 1,000 of specialists from various fields were needed to deal with it. The entire installation was top secret, guarded by the Soviet elite Spetsnaz units. Training room. Top of the antenna. Guide.
Сейчас мы находимся с вами на очень интересном месте. Это называется объект Chernobyl 2.
We are in a very interesting place called Chernobyl 2.
Есть такое популярное
Chernobyl 2, on the internet also called the Moscow Eye, is the biggest over-the-horizon radar in the world. The purpose of the radar was to detect that the strategic or ballistic missiles were fired. It could also detect the enemy planes of the strategic destination. It was built in the 70s and launched for tests in 1982. In 1985, it was ready to work. An elite regiment stationed here served mostly by the officers. The infrastructure was very good. A town for the officers was built, in which there was a community center, officers' flats, a big gym, a beautiful cinema, and a school. Nearby, there is the city of Chernobyl, and 10 kilometers away, there is the town of Pripyat. All the facilities were here, so that the officers could perfectly do their duties. After the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in 1986, the antenna was contaminated, secret devices were dismantled and taken away, and the staff was evacuated. Now the antenna is a monument of the former Soviet Union to show that they could afford to build objects of this size. Let's go further to see another parts of the Duga 2. Top of the antenna. Roof of the control room. Parishi village. In order to understand how people had lived before and what happened to these houses which are located in Parishev, I suggest that you go and see a house which hasn't had owners for more than 29 years. Soon it's going to be 30 years. Let's go and see it. Soon after the explosion, the authorities ordered the evacuation of all people within 30 kilometers of the plant. Over 130,000 people from the surrounding towns and villages had to leave their homes. Some of the residents have returned. Parishi village. Tell us a few words about how you live here and about the year you were out. Indeed, we left only for 1 year, and then we heard the comment, "Go back home." We left everything and came back here. There were 140 people who came back to the town. There was a witness for each home. We were told, "Seize the houses so that no one takes them over." We had to let in the second group of people, and those people opposed. Those who lived near the reactor were given 40 minutes for each house to gather their belongings, and then they were evacuated. So those people said, "There is enough space for us too." And so they did not let in the second group of people. Once it happened, it was decided that no one would go. We were left as we had already entered the area. I have to admit that for a year or two, we did not pay for the electricity. We were provided support, flour, cereals, free of charge as a reward for the fact that we agreed to come. And then they began to ask why we settled here, and suddenly we were blamed for staying. But we didn't enter the area on our own. We received an order to do so. So why are orders given in such a way that no one knows anything? Back then, when we had come here, the militia themselves unloaded us. They helped us to do all the work. And then people come to their senses. Some were shouting, "We will go," and others, "We will go too," while those were already living here. Therefore, no one succeeded, neither they nor us. At that time, I was already working in Chernobyl, so I did not care. If I am to be here, I will be here. Although I didn't particularly like the Chernobyl climate, I had some pain in the chest, I couldn't walk or breathe normally. And here is fine. Why? How do I know? I really believe that there is a tubercle bacillus in the water there. Is there? Yes, of course. And secondly, in the years of the revolution, no one would bring the food or water there, and people were dying. And right there, they were digging pits and burying dead people. Later, on that cemetery, they built houses, and still different people were buried there, some very sick. And they died of their sicknesses. And perhaps that's the reason it was all released into the air. How old are you now? I am already 81 years old. Minsk. Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Minsk. We are now at the site which is called a sarcophagus observation deck, or the new safe confinement. This is probably the most popular place for everyone who comes to the area of the Chernobyl power plant. And behind me, you can see the sarcophagus, which was constructed in a very short time, in just 6 months. The monument, which is located here, was erected in 2006. And it was placed there to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the launching of the construction of the old sarcophagus. It was designed for the operational term of only 30 years. But you can see that there is already the new safe confinement ready in 80%, which is going to be installed in a year or even sooner. And it will cover the old sarcophagus, which was built in 1986 by the construction management of the US 605 and the personnel of the Chernobyl power plant. And so it will be a landmark event, as it's going to be the 30th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster. And all this time, Ukraine has participated in the rectification of the consequences at the Chernobyl power plant. The Chernobyl power plant is probably the biggest undertaking, with a huge number of people who participated in damage control and recovery. And everyone is looking forward to seeing the new sarcophagus, which will be constructed and put into operation. It will bring a second life to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Also, other work has begun, namely the work associated with the immobilization of the old equipment and the processing of radioactive waste, which will remain under the cover of the old sarcophagus.
It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level.